This has just been AMA style, so you can post notes. I think I didn't, I was doing some other multitasking. Awesome. Thank you, Sam. You have posted the Slido in the chat in this Jitsi screen. So find the chat and you can find that Slido, and that is really the best place. If you have a question, it's best to ask it there, and then people can upvote so that we're answering the questions that the most people are interested in hearing answers to. And then if there's like a follow-up question, you can always, people have sometimes typed that in here. I think this might be our biggest group yet. So in the past, it's been cool to unmute yourself and ask a question that way. All going to be an experiment today. But this meetup in general has been going on for like maybe the past a little bit over 2 months. Sam and I found each other in an alumni Facebook group because we both went to Dev Bootcamp, and it's for sure going to be a different experience finding a job as a junior dev than what I went through, but we just want to help people as much as we can and support in any way we can. So that is the reason for this meetup, and I think that's everything I wanted to say about the meeting in general. I can also just give a little bit of background about me. I, for a long time, didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. After college, I worked as a nanny for a couple of years. I worked as a teacher's aide in an elementary school. I worked in entry-level sales, and the nanny thing was kind of cool because I was in Europe for 4 years, but beyond that, I didn't really like any of my jobs, and eventually realized that I knew I had learned spoken languages and enjoyed doing that, and I discovered that learning computer languages was kind of cool too. And I got to make really cool things. So that is why I ended up going to Dev Bootcamp. I graduated in 2017 and have basically been working as an engineer since then. I joined a company called Trunk Club that was acquired by Nordstrom. And so just in the past couple of weeks, we really got absorbed into the Nordstrom organization. So I'm going through lots of change in my job currently, and that's been fun. I think that's enough of my background. I'll let Sam go on next.
Hey everybody, I'm Sam. I'm currently a front-end engineer at Lyft. I work in the mapping organization, building internal tools, web applications. So I work a lot with React. We use React, TypeScript, Node.js, the main stack, and then Lyft has a bunch of services, so I don't really touch backend stuff too much. I just use existing services that they have. But yeah, it took a long journey to get here to Lyft. It was a very long journey. I graduated during the dot-com bust a long time ago. Never ended up programming. I gave up too quickly when I was looking for a job. It was tough back then as well during the dot-com bust. Did a bunch of other stuff, worked in the mortgage industry, joined the Peace Corps. Fast forward to 2013, I went to Dev Bootcamp after I came back from the Peace Corps. Dev Bootcamp was the first bootcamp that spawned all of the bootcamps that we have now. I have some good stories about that too. Maybe some other time we can talk about it. It's pretty interesting how all the bootcamps spawned from Dev Bootcamp. But yeah, I went to Dev Bootcamp, then I worked at a bunch of different companies. I tried to help my friend start a startup. I worked at a tiny startup where I was the first engineer they hired. I worked at a company that was pretty big, worldwide company, Here Technologies. They had 10,000 employees when I worked there. I worked at Pivotal, which is known for doing pair programming and TDD, extreme programming style of building software, which is very different too. And now I work at Lyft. I'll let our special guest introduce himself now. Nathan, go ahead.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, Brady. Thanks, Sam. It's really cool to hear from both of you about your stories. Can everyone hear me okay? Am I coming through okay? Okay,
Yep.
good. Good. So, yeah, I know it sounded like we might be testing Jitsi. It's Jitsi, right? Not Jitsi. Not okay. Cool. Jitsi.
I've been calling it Jitsi.
Yeah,
Jitsi,
I don't know.
I did Hooked on Phonics when I was a kid, so I'm assuming it's Jitsi. Maybe I don't know if that's right. Yeah. So cool. So I'm Nathan Thomas. I'm a fairly recent bootcamp grad myself. I went to Lambda School. I'm currently an engineer at Twitter. At Twitter, I currently work on the, oh, by the way, got to preface all this by saying I speak for myself. I don't speak for my employer or for the bootcamp that I went to with anything I'm talking about today. These are just like my opinions about my experience and my journey into tech. But with all that being said, I work a lot on like twitter.com and the web app, which is and also some of the desktop app kind of stuff. Haven't done anything to do with like Android or iOS clients or anything like that. And I currently work on like some of the conversation tools that are used at Twitter, like tweets, retweets, things like that, direct messages. What else? So I went to Lambda School. I started in 2018, end of 2018, and I graduated. I finished up around the end of 2019. So I was there for almost a year, which is actually a lot longer than most students are there. It's the program itself, if you do full time, is 9 months. But I worked for the school as well as a section lead, which I can get into if people want later. Before that, I is actually, so when I graduated from college, um, yeah, I have a degree, but like it was a degree in like nothing, like nothing relevant, didn't get me a job right out of college. I ended up falling into a career in something that I didn't even study, like a lot of people that went to school and got a degree in something that they didn't care about. And I didn't like that job. And I was in healthcare. My last position in healthcare, doing some of the business stuff I was doing, was a contract position. So I ended up during some layoffs with that org. I ended up getting cut as well, and I was like unemployed for a year, just job hunting, stuff like that, trying to find anything, and like not getting calls back from startups or anything else like business related. And then I just kind of randomly started teaching myself to code for something fun on the side, and it just kind of like morphed into somehow me ending up at Lambda. So that's kind of like the too long read of my background, even though that was still pretty long. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's good to get a lot of your background. It helps people like come up with questions. But before we get started, I think Brady wanted to share our links for like our LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect. Usually we share it at the end, and then we realize that not everybody stays to the end. So
sure.
If people want to connect, they can send us connection requests. Also, we have a Slack that we mostly use if people
Sure.
want to jump in there.
Cool.
For communication. And then usually Brady will be the moderator. She's good at that.
Yes, I will.
So she can read out the questions.
Yeah, and I can just go ahead and start with the first one. It's got 5 upvotes. So what's your current role at your position like? And how have your responsibilities evolved since the start of your journey as a software engineer?
Great question. Okay, so the program I'm in, so my current role, it's obviously, like I said, software engineer. I'm part of the apprentice program at Twitter. So a little bit of background on what that is. Historically, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, what I've been able to piece together. I'm not speaking for like anyone, any org, any company or anything, but like as best I have been able to understand it historically, Twitter hasn't really hired a lot of people directly into like software engineering roles right out of boot camp. There are outliers, but historically that's been the case, and they're trying to fix that. So what they did was they made a program to onboard people from or from boot camps. It's a full-time role in the org. It's on the engineering ladder. So yeah, we're expected to like push code from day one, and then at the end of the first year inside the org, you know, hopefully get promoted and just keep working up the ranks. So that's what I'm in right now, and it's been a great experience. My responsibilities, you know, have been really just to work on bugs, work on some new features, work and pair program with people in various areas of both my squad and the team, and sometimes the org. Like I've written multiple TDDs already for features that I've either worked on or code developed, and just kind of had my hands in a lot of different areas. I've also like volunteered to teach new hire orientation classes for a team, which has been really cool. I've like taught a class on React hooks to a bunch of people on our team. Just kind of like stuff like that that is extra, you know, that you kind of volunteer for if you're interested in it. How have my responsibilities evolved since the start of my journey as a software engineer? I think like any job, when you get onboarded to a new company, when you're brought in and trained, the expectation is that in the first, you know, 2 to 3 months, maybe, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time just learning, no matter what level you're at. Like, even if you are like a senior engineer and you come into a brand new organization, and obviously I'm not a senior engineer yet, but I've seen a senior engineer get hired since I've been at Twitter, and she like basically had a conversation with me about this same subject, about how no matter what level you're at, there's going to be some like ramp up process. And it might get faster over time the more experienced you are, but there's still going to be some of that experience joining a new org. So when I joined, you know, there was an expectation that I was going to be spending a lot of time like reading internal docs, learning about processes, the way that I was, you know, the preferred way we wrote code inside of our code base. And as time goes on, those expectations kind of morph a little bit. And expectation becomes, you know, like what new perspectives and things can you bring to the team? Something that I've been asked a lot is to make sure to bring things up. If I see things and I'm like, why are we doing this? My team actually wants me to bring that up. They want me to question things. They want me to point out ways that we can improve. So it's kind of like maybe a change in expectation from what is expected of me. Hopefully that answers the question. I'm still pretty new in my journey, so I'm sure it will change even more with time.
I got a follow-up question for that. Are they currently accepting applications for the apprenticeship, or has that been halted because of COVID?
The application isn't live right now, but for anyone that's interested, and again, I can't speak for Twitter on when it will be posted or anything like that, but I think my advice to people would be just keep your eyes on the open like job board, which is actually pretty much how I saw the applications when they were posted the first time around. It was like summer of 2019, I think, when I saw the applications go up for the last cohort.
Okay. I can also answer this question. So I've been a software engineer for 7 years now. I graduated the bootcamp in the spring of 2013. So that's when I started my journey. And I did all kinds of stuff. So my responsibilities were like always different. Like starting a startup, helping your friends start a startup is just like hanging out with your friends, just hacking on stuff all day. I did contract work, which was just kind of work whenever you can work. It was remote, but up until now, at Lyft is different from all my other roles. There's a lot more ownership they give you. So currently, I don't know if all the teams are like this, but I don't have a product manager, which was really hard for me. I'm still trying to figure it out because I'm not used to that. I always had like a product manager to like steer the ship and kind of tell me like what I need to do. At Lyft, you kind of gotta like see what the problems are, and then you figure out everything. You gotta wear all the hats. At least my team, you gotta wear the hat of product manager. You gotta communicate with all the stakeholders and figure out what needs to be built. I even have to make all my own Jira tickets and stuff. That's my least favorite part of my job. I just like to build stuff. So I'm still trying to figure out if I like it or not. I'm still trying to get used to it. I'm approaching a year at Lyft, but like Nathan said, it takes, even when you're senior, it takes a while to onboard different companies because all the companies are different. That's why it's kind of hard to prepare, because you go in and then this company just operates totally differently. I worked at Pivotal before this, and it was 100% pair programming. So it wasn't as flexible. I was back to 9 to 5 job. We had to be there from 9 to 5 because you have to pair. So they need everybody to come and go at the same time. It was just totally different way of building software. There's no pull request, nothing, because everybody's pair programming. So you have 2 pairs of eyes on it the whole time you're coding, and you switch pairs every day. So it's totally different. And the culture is to TDD everything. I don't know if people know, but Pivotal made like the Jasmine testing framework and stuff like that. They also make Pivotal Tracker, which is like Jira. So I worked at Cloud Foundry. So yeah, it just keeps evolving. Every company I go to is different. So the best skill to have is just to be able to adapt and kind of just learn as you go. I try to bring in things that I saw worked well at other companies I worked at. Try to bring those ideas to the next company that I go to. But sometimes the ideas they just don't work with the way that the new company that you're at. But yeah, what about you, Brady?
Yeah, I would love to also give my take. I do see that there's a follow-up question for Nathan. How competitive was the application to the apprenticeship?
Okay. I was told by the recruiter right when I got my job offer. So there are 15 apprentices spread out across San Francisco, Boulder, and New York. Just for the 4 or 5 positions in San Francisco, Twitter received about 20,000 applications, and I was one of the ones hired.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't know that during the interview process, because it would have made me even more nervous than I was.
Totally, man. So my current role, I'm working as pretty much a front-end engineer. Like 90% of the work that I do has been front-end stuff for the past year. And before that, I was more of a engineer support role. So there were different channels that we would get bugs reported to our team, and we would investigate. We would kind of triage and see if it seemed like there was something really, some huge issue that we needed to solve immediately. Usually that wasn't the case. So usually it was like, this is weird. The same activity, like the same bug, has been reported like 10 different times for this new feature. So there's probably some bug or an edge case that nobody had figured out. So our team would dig in a little bit more and confirm that actually a bug. Is it just an edge case that someone hadn't thought to solve and handle properly, or is it maybe just user error and we need to somehow improve the user experience or explain better, communicate to our shareholders better? Because we have a lot of internal apps that we were supporting in addition to the customer-facing app. And today I work on the customer-facing app. So when I joined the team, it was a lot more back-end related and digging through logs and trying to understand what was the full story, versus now it's front-end. So previously I was really splitting time a lot. But half of my day was working on tickets and then half of my day building new things. And it's funny that Sam just mentioned how he doesn't have a product manager. Joining my team and getting a product manager to help write out all the tickets and lay out in a really easy manner, like this is the little chunk of work that you're going to work on this ticket. It was like night and day. It made my life so much easier. And I didn't have that when I was on the other team. So that at that point, I didn't realize what how it's just a different skill, and it's really hard to know and to learn how to break that work apart. So I have really enjoyed having a product manager for that reason. Yeah, so now I have more meetings and try to get a better overview of and dig deep into the features that my team is working on and building out, whereas before I had a really broad overview of everything that was happening, but not a super deep knowledge. So that's a difference. And I think as I become more and more senior, it's becoming more, because I'm still like maybe mid-level, a little past entry level, I think. And it's becoming more of really understanding why is this solution something that is going to help the company. And I've been spending more time on architecture versus just, here, do this ticket. It's like the architecture of the actual feature that is going to be rolled out.
Yeah, I saw a relevant tweet this morning. It said something like, junior developers, when they're asked to do something, they're like, yes, I can make whatever you want. And then senior developers first question they ask is, why? Why do you need this when somebody asks them to build them something?
Yeah, I saw that too.
It's great.
I relate to that a lot, because now I always ask, why? Why do we even need this? I need to like have it make sense before I build it, because I've worked on projects where we work on it for months and then barely anybody uses them. And like, I just wasted months of my life building this thing. Like, why did we build this? So eventually you learn to always ask why when they ask you to build something.
Cool.
But, yeah.
I think we can move on to the next one. What, in your opinion, are the two most important assets for junior devs to have polished to make their application stand out? So examples like resume, cover letter, GitHub, or Git portfolio, and their portfolio.
Got it. Okay, this is a good question. Oh, and there are some loaded things in here too, right? Because right now in tech, there's like a whole conversation about the toxicity of having, as like someone trying to break in, of having to like plaster your GitHub with little green squares and things like that. And I want to acknowledge that I generally tend to push a lot of code to my GitHub, but for anyone looking at it, I don't want at my GitHub, if you ever stumble upon it, I don't want you to think that's because I have to. It's because I like to. I got into this because I like to code, like I said before, and then I kind of stumbled into a boot camp and then ended up like working really hard at it and yeah, then job hunting. So I do that because I like it. That being said, it is you do need to be active on GitHub. as a new developer trying to break in, that becomes less and less important over time, especially when you start spending most of your time pushing code to private repositories that is not going to show up on GitHub. Employers are very understanding of that, especially when you get more like mid-level or senior. Like they know, like, you know, they know, like, you're not pushing open source code all day every day. So, but when you're trying to break into tech, you do need to be active on GitHub. If someone goes to your GitHub and it's just a wasteland with no code pushed and no projects, then they're going to wonder, like, do you even code? Because that is your code when you're starting out. That's GitHub. That is what you're doing. So my recommendation there, I think, would be to have some cool projects. I always tell students and people that ask me that I think the best projects are not the cookie cutter ones that you might get in like a boot camp. Not that those are bad, those are good to learn, but like, do you have something you're passionate about? I was just speaking with a friend last night who, granted, is currently employed, but he's doing a project because he wants to do camping trips, and there's nothing out there that will like allow him to like track his gear and stuff like that. And he's doing, I've talked to other people that are musicians that are like doing projects for anyways. I don't want to get off on a tangent about that because that wasn't really the question, but hopefully that kind of like gets you jogging a little bit, like, oh, I could make some like really cool passion projects about things I like that combo with tech, because that passion will shine through in interviews. I think that's very important. The other thing that I think is really important, so I know this question asks for two things. I think the other big thing I would say is your portfolio site. And I don't want to diminish the resume. I'm going to get to that in just a second. I'm talking about like when you're getting your legs underneath you, which two things should you be focusing on? I think you should be focusing on your GitHub, and I think you should make a portfolio site. At Lambda and a lot of other places, I see template portfolios recommended a lot. A really popular one is HTML5 up. And it's like vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and CSS templates that you can use for free. And you can get a portfolio site up on Netlify in a day and start hosting and presenting some of that stuff. I would generally not recommend that you do a custom portfolio initially. It is more important for you to have a portfolio if you don't have a portfolio. So get something up with a template. Once you have your name out there, you're pushing code to GitHub, you have a portfolio site, then you can think about a custom portfolio. When the job hunt time comes, that's when it becomes important to craft a nice resume. That's when it's important to make a resume. And that's why I listed the other two things as my top two, not because resumes aren't important, they are, but you're going to want that at the job hunt stage. And at that point, hopefully your GitHub is active enough that it will speak for itself. You've already gotten your portfolio site up, so you can shift your focus a little bit and make your resume your priority to make that really nice and fire that off to companies. And the last one on this list is a cover letter. And I think cover letters are cool, but they are the least important on this list. And a good cover letter should talk about you, why you're a good fit for the company, and what you like about the company, and can be written in about 30 minutes. And it should probably be tailored directly to the company. And you can just Google cover letter templates and use one. So I think that's probably the least important, only because of the speed and amount of time, like the speed that you can prepare them in and the amount of time that you should probably spend on them if you're firing off hundreds of applications.
I think I agree with everything Nathan said. How about you, Brady?
Yeah, that sounded like really good advice.
There's a follow-up question in the Jitsi chat. It says, how extensive do items on the portfolio site need to be?
How extensive do they need to be? That's a good question. By extensive, do they mean like sometimes people will have like icons of every single like part of the tech stack they used on that project? Is that what they mean, or do they mean more like, let me check the comments as well. Do they mean more like,
they mean like a full huge app?
Oh, I see, like a huge full app. Good question. Okay, so if you do like a site from something like, I don't know if anyone here has ever seen like frontendmentor.io. pro tip, go check that out, frontendmentor.io. It's a free site. They have prompts to make like landing pages and marketing page sites and stuff like that. It's all front end, obviously. It's just a single page a lot of times, but if you make it like the design file, it looks really clean. That's a great portfolio piece, especially when you're starting out. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't have to be like a huge app. You're showing off your design chops that you can translate designs into like pixel per design and something that's responsive. I did one or two of those in the very beginning. As time goes on, this is what I would recommend. I would probably, like, you don't want to have 10 different apps that you've made on your portfolio site, right? Like that's awesome that you code that much or that you have that much, but you should probably boil it down. People aren't going to dig through 10 different apps. Boil it down to like the top 4 to 6 apps that you're really proud of. And what you start doing over time is, if you have something else come along that you're really proud of, you can swap it in for something else. And you start like almost upgrading and leveling up your portfolio and swapping in projects and moving things out as you get bigger projects and better things you're proud of. And that's, I think, what my answer here would be. I don't think you have to just enter the first round with your portfolio site with just tons of full stack apps. I think it's okay to put the best work that you currently have on there. And then as you keep pushing yourself in this field and you keep working, you start swapping things that you consider to be a better reflection of your skill set into your portfolio. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I even like small kind of tools too, just like Chrome extensions that do something cool, or like you just made like a little tool that does something, but it's still like somebody posted, I posted on LinkedIn, I think it was last week, about I just wanted to see what projects people are working on. And the one that stood out to me, like one person made like a video game and it was super cool. Like, I don't know how to do that. So like it interested me. I'm like, wow, this is like super awesome. It was like an 8-bit like video game in the browser. Somebody else made like this thing that generated like email templates. Like it was like a no code kind of tool where you enter in and you can like drag and drop things to like create fancy email templates, because email templates are hard. That was cool. Somebody else made like a Spotify, like name that tune game. It's just those are like full apps, but there's also like small kinds of stuff. Like even if it's like a developer tool that like pretty prints your JSON or something like that. I like those kind of stuff too. And also, you can always just start without a portfolio page too. You can pin the projects you like on your GitHub. Just make sure you ship your app. So GitHub, in the about section on the app, you can put the link. Make sure you do that. I mean, especially with all the tools like Netlify, Vercel, and stuff like that, it takes like a minute to deploy the app. So just ship it. So people, the good part about having it on GitHub that I really like is people can see the code and click the link to open up the app at the same time. But they can't do that if you don't ship it. So you got to ship it somewhere, put the link, make everything easy to look at, pin the repository on your GitHub so it shows up when they go to your page. Those are all things I recommend to people. And yeah, if you go to look at my GitHub, like Nathan was saying, it doesn't matter that much once you get into your career. Like most of my commits are private. There's hardly any green squares on my GitHub if you go look at it. If I look at it, there's a bunch of green squares because my work at Lyft, but it doesn't show up to other people. So it doesn't matter as much later on, but in the beginning, yeah, I think it matters a lot.
I actually just realized not too long ago, you can switch it. So you can make it visible if you're contributing to a private repo. Of course, nobody can see your commits or anything, but the green squares will show up.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
it's in the drop down by the heat graph.
And then there was another follow-up kind of comment about someone being much more comfortable with backend versus front end and feeling like they're not artsy. And I don't think you have to, especially if you're more interested in backend stuff. There's a lot of cool things you can do and keep the front end really simplistic, like even just using a bootstrap, CSS.
You can even just make an API, just like,
yeah.
Some APIs are simple. Like there's like a cat API, and all it does is return like cat gifs when you send the request to it. And like tons of people use those tools. So if you get real people using the tool you build, that's good.
Cool. Sounds like we're ready to move on. So next one is, how was your experience transitioning from bootcamp to working at Twitter? What challenges did you face, and did things go as you had expected?
Sure, that's a good question. There's also a question all the way down towards the bottom about like how I got my first job through networking or cold applying, and if it's cool, I'm gonna like roll these two into the same question because they're kind of the same sort of thing. So how was my experience transitioning from bootcamp to working at Twitter? I was going full steam while I was at Twitter, or sorry, while I was at my boot camp. I really went hard in the paint, so to speak. You know, I didn't really have like a lot else going for me before I did it, so I kind of went into it, and when I committed to it, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, like I'm going to jump in with both feet into the deep end. So it was really painful. There were quite a few nights in the first month in particular where I'm not going to say that I didn't like cry and stuff like that, because I was so overwhelmed at sometimes. But you know, things started coming together. Code started making more sense. Something I didn't mention earlier is before I started kind of self-teaching myself while I was job hunting in 2018, I'd never coded before. So programming was a new experience for me. And that was a lot to overcome. At the end of boot camp, or sorry, halfway through boot camp, I actually, Lambda School actually does a capstone project halfway through, which is like 2 months. You do user stories, you do user interviews, you do a TDD, you plan out your milestones and sprints, and then you work with a team of like maybe 5 to 10 engineers and data scientists to build out a product. And around that time, I started job hunting. I started firing off applications. I hadn't even gone through Lambda School's computer science curriculum yet. What I'd done is I'd gone and I had bought a Udemy course on JavaScript data structures and algorithms, and I self-taught that stuff to myself to leverage the fact that I already knew JavaScript. Lambda School teaches that content in Python. So while I eventually learned that in Python, I wanted to start job hunting right away, and I knew I needed to know that stuff. So I started applying really early. And that's a mistake that I don't think it's a fatal mistake at all. I think like lots of people get jobs and they finish their boot camp, but honestly, I think more people should just start applying to jobs while they're in their boot camp, unless they've signed some contract that says they can't. I'll be really upfront about the fact that my first interviews were super rough. My first interview ever, my first technical interview ever, I thought I was doing okay. And the person stopped me halfway through and they were like, "Is this your first technical interview ever?" and it wasn't in a very kind tone of voice that they said it. And it was like really awkward and embarrassing and hard for me at the time. But I still I was like, okay, well, that's a learning experience. I know I need to like study more in that area that we were talking about at that moment. So I did that, and I did a bunch of interviews like that over the course of like 2 or 3 months. And every time I got a little bit better, and every time I got a little bit better. And then sooner or later, I was making it to final rounds with companies, and I still hadn't finished Lambda. And around that time is when I got picked up in the interview process with Twitter. To answer the question down below, it was a cold apply. I didn't know anyone at Twitter. I actually didn't know anyone in the tech field before I started this journey. And yeah, it was hard to teach myself to fight through some of those things in the interview process. And like, I mean, it's tough. Like, it's a numbers game, basically. You fire off applications, and like sometimes I had interviews where people would respond to me and just be like, hey, you know, we're going to go in a different direction. And that's like the only feedback you'll ever get in the interview. But I think for me, the biggest challenges that I faced for myself, as like a white male trying to enter in tech, the biggest challenges that I faced were in a lot of ways just people really were looking for people with more experience than me, and people were it's tough, right? I see a lot of job application or job postings that like say it's for a junior position, but they're really wanting someone with like a couple of years of experience, which isn't fair. And the other big challenge that I faced, that you can probably guess from everything I've said so far, is just mental. Like those bad interviews I had, the ones where people like kind of got a little snarky in my interviews and said some of that stuff to me. That's really disheartening. And if I'd given up there, or I'd stopped applying for like the rest of the time I was in Lambda, I wouldn't be working at Twitter right now if I hadn't kept pushing myself. Yeah.
I bombed a lot of interviews in my career. I interviewed at Uber once, and I bombed that interview super hard. But now I work at Lyft. So don't give up if you bomb interviews.
So take that, Uber.
Just keep working at it. Also, I've failed my first interview at Lyft. I've interviewed at Lyft twice, a year apart from each other. Never got an offer the first time, and then I got an offer the second time. I've interviewed at Facebook 3 times. Never made it on site. Failed on the technical phone every time. So once you do start getting interviews, it's going to be tough because it's tough when you just fail at the interview. Just keep trying to take each failure as a learning experience. So.
Yeah, I also just wanted to underscore, I love the idea of interviewing while you're still in a boot camp, if anyone here is still in a boot camp. I sat down recently to try to think of like, what are the 10 things that I wish that I had known going into the boot camp? And I had no idea. Like, people had told me that it was going to be the hardest thing that I had ever done. And I was like, yeah, but I like moved to a different country and learned the language while I didn't speak like any of it. That was really hard, and I got through it, and I figured out a bunch of stuff. But no, like being in the boot camp, it was just so overwhelming. It was like, I don't know, it was just so much information all at once, and I didn't have enough time to learn it all. So I wish I would have thought ahead and tried to make my resume, and like, I think it would have been cool if the bootcamp had helped us out beforehand and been like, you can probably say things like this and then wait to fill in like what the project was, and just have to add a couple of bullet points about the project, but get everything else kind of teed up. That would have made it a lot easier for me to start applying. I remember having graduated the whole time, like there was a remote portion where I was like, well, I still feel really confused, but once I get on site, that's when I'll know what's going on. And then the on site was broken down into 3 different levels. And the first level, I was like, well, those people are in the next level and they know what's going on. And then like every time I was like, wait, but I still have so much that I don't know. So once I graduated, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a couple of weeks and review and go over everything, and then I'll understand everything. And that was just totally the wrong mindset. Like, I should have just applied as soon as I could have applied, because then I started slowly forgetting as time went by. What I can't remember. Oh, to the question of network versus just cold applying. I applied in 2017, so like the market was just totally different back then. I ended up getting my job through cold applying. I had tried networking. It's really, really, really powerful. I totally recommend that people do that. But at that point in time, I had good luck with the cold apply. Sam, do you want to talk about your experience with networking?
Oh yeah. I never applied for any of the jobs I've ever had as a software engineer. So you just got to find what works for you. I did a different approach. I volunteered a lot. Volunteered at Node School, Rails Bridge, Mission Bit, Open Tech School. I live in San Francisco, so there's like a million different, everything is tech here. So you can find stuff in the community if you live in a tech hub, like a community that needs volunteers. You know more than other people. So even if you just went to a boot camp, you can still teach new people because new people are just starting their journey. They don't even know how to do like a for loop and stuff. So helping people is the best because it just feels good to help people. And what goes around comes around. So like all those people I mentored a dev bootcamp for like 2 years after I graduated. I was a coach there. I was a TA at General Assembly for one of their front end courses. I did lots of hackathons. So I formed all these like groups. My network grew huge because of that. Just because everything you volunteer for, every place you mentor, every class you take, all of that stuff builds your network a lot. I did Udacity nano degree. My network grew a lot just from doing the nano degree because I formed an in-person study group with people that were taking the nano degree. And then later on when I was looking for a job, my network is so huge that by that time, people are like working all over the place, people that I helped before, and they just gave me referrals to come interview at their company. So that's the approach I take. I hate code applying. I don't think it works. I think you can get lucky. I mean, it obviously worked for Brady and Nate, who's in here. He was my mentee at Lambda School. He did a code apply and got hired. I think code applying is harder in the tech hubs like San Francisco because there's so much competition. Nate, he applied a little bit outside of San Francisco, so better chances that way. There's not 20,000 people applying for the position like Nathan's one, which he battled everybody and got in, but that's not easy. So you kind of just, it depends where you're living. It just depends if you have an easy time talking to people. It depends on a lot of things. You got to just kind of try out and see like what starts working. I mean, if you apply to 1,000 jobs and you don't get a single interview, it's probably a good idea to like switch up the strategy a little bit and try like something else out. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
And I also think it was just luck. I applied at the right time to the right place, and it just so happened that the other people in comparison to me, like, they're like, no, yeah, this girl's better than what we've seen. We'll take her. So
I want to +1 all of that. It was a lot of luck. I feel very lucky and very fortunate to be where I'm at. And I also want to +1 the teaching and working with other people as soon as humanly possible. I actually sent out a tweet on this recently. I believe firmly in this. I practiced this while I was at Lambda School, and a lot of the people that I spent day in and day out with there did as well. We spent time teaching other newer students. Since I've left, I've tried to do that kind of stuff as well, and it has consistently been the most rewarding part of anything I've done, because you see other people grow to be where you're at right now, and they are working to better themselves.
It also solidifies your knowledge. You learn by teaching other people. Because then you have to understand it well to explain it to somebody else. But yeah, but people remember that. So like when you're looking for a job, like they want to refer you more, you know? So And they have knowledge that you can do it because you taught them how to like build stuff. So that's why I think it's one of the best things to like volunteer if you can. I know not everybody has the hours in the day to volunteer, but if you do, even if it's just 1 or 2 hours a week, like Node School is like once a month. I don't know if they're doing it right now, but when they were doing it, it was like once a month, and you get to go hang out at Mozilla or NPM used to have it here in Oakland. You get free pizza, hang out with people. So it's fun too.
Cool. Next question, I think. How common is ES5 these days? Legacy code and job requirements, ES6, or is it more convenient to skip ahead to ES6 instead?
Good question. This is something that like threw me for a loop. It's not easy to like walk into this field and see all of the acronyms and jargon and like things thrown around and hear people talking about like, oh, you should definitely learn ES6 syntax. And then like, just as soon as you start doing that, people are like, oh, but what about ES next? And you're like, wait, ES next? What the heck? So I totally get it. I totally understand. I think my answer is learn JavaScript in general. Just make it your goal to learn JavaScript as well as possible. Along the way, understand like when was this feature released, like arrow functions or like array methods, like when did they come out, when was that a thing, what do people mean when they say ES5 and ES6? I think when I did my interview on site, one of the things that I did was an ES5. So it did help for me to know that, but that was at Twitter. That was the first time that I had ever experienced that in an interview. That may be different. Maybe other people have had that a bunch. But I think my answer to this is understand what ES5 is. Know that like, especially in the React world, if you're doing stuff with React, it's all going to be ES next, which is like not only ES6, but like a lot of the current stuff. And understand why people would ever want to write ES5. Like a lot of the common use cases are lower level. I don't want to really call it low level because it's not like binary or, whatever, but like, like in the JavaScript world, the lower, like maybe modules or linter rules or random things that you might want to write with some older school JavaScript, unless you're running like Babel or something to compile it down to basically ES5. Understand why that's necessary, understand why someone would want to do that. But I think if you're just starting out, I would recommend just to learn JavaScript. Like go to a site like javascript.info or wherever and just learn JavaScript, learn it really well, learn about different methods, learn about classes, objects, arrays, like all of that stuff. And when you have a firm foundation on that, then start understanding what the differences are and things like this.
Yeah. I don't think it matters if you should target ES5 or ES6. Just build stuff. When you build stuff, you're going to have to learn both. So just learn it when you need it, would be my advice. Like if you're building a project, like you're going to get stuck with stuff along the way and you're going to have to learn. And then you learn about arrow functions or you learn about promises, async await. You watch a tutorial and you just see how people do it. So I don't think you have to think about it too much. Like, do I do ES5 or ES6 first? Just like Nathan said, just jump in, write some JavaScript, make stuff show up on the page, have fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a tough question because any company could have any different combination of ES5, ES6. I don't know enough about like what's most common or what the mix is, but in general, if you can prove that you've learned how to figure stuff out, then it doesn't matter. Like you'll be able to figure out what you need to figure out on the job. So
yeah, things are constantly changing. Even at Lyft, I never wrote TypeScript before, and now everything's in TypeScript, and I just had to learn it. When every company I go to is, even though I'm working with the similar stack, they'll like the next year there's just new stuff that comes out. Like TypeScript wasn't huge a couple of years ago. It was like still like people wondering if it's hype or not. Like I think before even Flow was like kind of even with TypeScript, and then TypeScript won the war, and now a lot of companies are like writing all their code in TypeScript rather than just regular JavaScript. So it's better for me. I have an easier time just learning things when I need to learn it. Otherwise you forget if you just try to learn a whole bunch of stuff before you actually need to use it, like in a project.
When you're just starting out, I've had multiple people with a lot of experience tell me this in like one-on-one meetings. When you're starting out, you are partly being hired because people have recognized that you'd be fun, like a good person to work with, and you have good skills so far for where you're at, and you're being hired for your ability to learn. The ability that you have displayed to learn things well, to learn them in a short amount of time, and to be able to start practicing new things when you encounter them. And that's a really good skill to pick up that will never, ever fail you for the rest of your career in this industry.
Yeah, that's what all the companies are looking for. It's just, can you learn fast? Especially in front-end world, things change so rapidly. There's always new stuff coming out.
all right. Next question then. Are there any unique pieces of advice or experiences you learned at Lambda School that maybe other boot camps might not have shared?
Yeah, I kind of already touched on one, and that is doing technical design documents for the capstone project that Lambda has you do. I don't know if some other boot camps do that. I do know that a lot don't. Talking to other people who are just getting started in this industry and who have their first jobs, a lot of other people have never done one. And it was really great to be able to walk into Twitter with having one of those under my belt. And when I had my first TDD, it was more about learning the formatting that the new company wanted it to be in and like the basic structure that they preferred. I think even if you're not in a boot camp, you can replicate this in your own personal projects. There are, you could just Google technical design document templates and use that, start customizing it, maybe Google a little bit, and look up how to write those just for practice, and do some of the stuff that goes along with that, like user stories, talking to people who might use your app, interview them. We for the capstone project, I think we had to interview like 30 or 40 people to talk to them about how they might use our app and what features they wanted before we even wrote a single line of code. And when I was in the moment doing that, I heard tons of people that were in the same cohort going through the capstone project section talking about that and saying, oh, I just want to code, like, when will this be over? Well, it turns out now that I'm actually in a real job, I can't do any feature or any massive change to our code base without writing one of those. So it's a key skill to have. And I would say for anyone, even if they're not in a boot camp, get some experience just writing some of those kinds of documents, because that's going to really serve you well. Another thing that I think Lambda really provided me, even though I said I studied it beforehand, ultimately it's still a real key piece of the curriculum, is data structures and algorithms. A lot of most 15-week boot camps don't provide that. which is okay. If you went to one of those and you're still searching for a job or something, like totally cool. You can just do exactly what I did before I started the job hunt, which is self-teach. Go and like Nate dropped the link to the class on Udemy that I took. That's the exact one. If you scroll up in the Jitsi chat, there are other good ones. I have a front-end master's subscription that I think that's probably a good course too, but front-end master's is like, I think it's like what, $30 or $40 a month. It's a lot more. Udemy, if you catch the sales, that class that I took is like $10. So yeah, I think that's key. It's not an absolute requirement to get a first job, but it will be a big leg up if you I firmly believe that part of the reason I made it to the second round out of the 3 or 4 rounds that I did at Twitter was because I did some I solved like a matrix problem and did some like quick sort stuff on the first round interview problems. And I wouldn't have known that if it wasn't both for my self-teaching and for Lambda's curriculum. And what else? Another thing that I think I could say, maybe probably the last one for now. I could probably go on for a while since it was a year program. Actually, 2 more. One's real quick. The 20-minute rule. Lambda talks a lot about this, where your gut impulse when you coming from a traditional education system, no matter what level you went through, whether that's high school or college, where we're in classrooms and when we get stuck, we ask the teacher, is our gut impulse with programming when we start is to immediately try to ask someone. And Lambda really instilled in students to, at minimum, do a 20-minute, like try to debug, like Google, practice your Google foo. Like that's a key developer skill as well. And only after 20 to 30 minutes of being stuck should you reach out to someone. And that's really important. And the last one I was going to throw in there real quick is just the ability to learn. I definitely am a lot better at learning things now than before I went through Lambda.
Awesome. I cannot offer any any additions to that. I didn't go to Lambda. Okay, so next question. How about some recommendations for junior devs on how to cold network or inquire about job opportunities at companies via LinkedIn? If you help a junior dev, how can they help you?
This is a really good question. It's a good question because I've been on both sides of it recently within the last year or 2 years. When I was job hunting, I tried to initially go and network at conferences. I made the mistake of going to big conferences. Don't do that and expect to make a whole bunch of really personal best friends that will help you. I think Sam's advice earlier about volunteering at maybe smaller meetups and getting to know people in your local community is a better tip that I should have done. So I think when it comes to networking is hard when you're starting out. Networking is really hard. I think I said earlier, like I cold applied to the position that I'm in right now, and like it's hard to network. LinkedIn can be even harder. I think you should try for it. I think there is nothing wrong with sending out an email or a message, but I would very, very strongly caution you against sending messages that run like this. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I saw a position open with your company and I was wondering if you'd refer me. That can work. I've never heard of it working, mostly because something that isn't talked about sometimes, at least for some bigger companies, I know Google does this for sure. They actually give their employees a referral score in terms of how good the quality of their candidates are that they've referred. And so a lot of times you will actually have to go through multiple rounds of pre-screens with that person who's going to refer you before they'll even refer you. And that's a lot of work for them. Typically, a lot of people that get requests like that, especially for really popular companies, will start only referring people that they have worked with before or referring people that they have built a relationship with. So maybe instead of just cold DMing people when you're starting out, instead of cold DMing people and asking, hey, can you refer me for a job? Something that I did was to send out messages to people that I want to friend and say, hey, I really love your company, and I hope it's cool. I'm sending you like a friend request on LinkedIn, and yeah, I'd love to hear more about your company in the future, or like I'd love to hear about your career path, or whatever. I'd love to hear about your own personal journey. Would you have like 15 minutes sometime to hop on a Zoom call and just for me to pick your brain about everything you've done to get to where you are? It's like really unassuming. It's just wanting to learn. I did that a bunch when I started at Lambda. I fired off about 400 of those messages to people in various areas inside and outside of Lambda, and about 10% of those responded to me. None of those ended up being the way I got my job, but I'm still friends with a lot of those people, and that's what I would recommend on LinkedIn. You never know if one of those relationships will turn into something after you talk to someone and they see your posts on LinkedIn because you're connected, and you talk to them in person, get to know you a little bit. Maybe they will offer to refer you to a job, which is really nice if that happens. Again, that didn't happen to me, but I've heard of it happening to people. So
it probably will happen. Sometimes it takes years. So you just got to try and lower your time preference. Like, just make friends with people. It comes back around. It can be like totally years later. Like even my position at Lyft now, I was referred. I tell this story all the time, by somebody who I met because I answered their question on Stack Overflow in 2014. That's how we first met. And years later, I got him a job at Cver Technologies. I referred him to the company. And then he ended up leaving that company later and going to work at Lyft. And then he referred me to Lyft. So that was like 5 years later after I had just gone on Stack Overflow and just answered his question about some problem he had with Backbone.js.
Yeah, I get reached out to every once in a while. I think this has come up in previous meetups, but I'm always so excited to talk to people who reach out to me, who've gone through a boot camp. I know I was told to do the exact same thing, reach out to people who went to boot camps, and specifically like your own. There's like this sense of community, and people typically want to help each other out. And then, I mean, my company gives me a referral bonus if it all works out. So I was close in, I think, February or March to helping a girl out who'd gone through a boot camp, and then we ended up going with an internal candidate. So that was like, I was happy for the girl who got the position, but also really sad that I wasn't able to help out the girl that I wanted to refer. But for the most part, like if people answer, and just because people don't answer doesn't mean that they're like, oh, this person is trying to talk to me. Like people are busy. People sometimes don't check their LinkedIns. Yeah, I think that advice to just like try to talk to the person is perfect.
Yeah. And also make sure if you went to a boot camp, make sure you leverage that community as well, especially if the boot camp's been around for years. Just make sure you put out there like questions you have, or people working at companies, just ask them. You can ask them questions about the companies they either work at or what kind of opportunities there are. Pay attention in the social media groups they have, if they have any. Like Dev Bootcamp is out of business, but they still have a Facebook group that all of us still participate in. Well, not all of us, but there's quite a bit of people that still participate in that group. And Dev Bootcamp's been out of business for years. And that's how Brady and I met. I forget what you posted, but I commented on it and we ended up talking. And then we ended up forming this thing. So like now this is like turning into like a community. So you can always start your own communities as well. That's a way to network. That's what I always done. Like I said, I took the self-driving car nano degree from Udacity. I never did complete it. It takes a lot of time. If you're thinking of taking that, it takes a lot of time and it's really math heavy. But that's not the point. The point is I started a study group because I needed help. I didn't know how to do any of that machine learning stuff. So I met a lot of awesome people from forming that study group.
All right. Any last thoughts on how a junior dev could help you? How could they help you if you're helping them?
I don't know. Both of you might be able to answer that better, since I'm still in a junior role.
The thing I think Sam had said earlier, like what goes around, or I don't remember who said it. What goes around comes around is just like you might be the person on the receiving end of this deal right now, but then who knows in like 5 or 10 years if you've been laid off, like
you don't have to reciprocate right away. It could be in the future, or you can just pay it forward to other people. I don't know if everybody's seen that movie, Pay It Forward, where you just do 3 things for other people and they don't do something back for you. They pay it forward to like 3 other people. That was like something they do in the movie, and how powerful that is by just you helping 3 people and each of those people helping 3 people. So yeah, I don't think we expect you like just because we're helping you to help us with something.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what makes me want to help all of you. It's because I got so much help when I was getting into tech.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Eric Nakagawa, he is one of our previous guests. He helped me a lot because he was somebody I met that has been in the industry for a long time. So I always asked him for advice, and I was lucky that he would like meet me for coffee and stuff whenever I was like considering offers or looking for like a job. So yeah, just try and make friends.
Cool. Next question. Recommendations on how a junior dev should take control of their career when breaking into tech, as opposed to just taking the first offer that comes to them.
Ooh, this is tough. This is a tough question. I have a lot of friends that have struggled with this as well. It is no secret that it is hard to get your first job sometimes in tech, and that after you get your first job, subsequent ones become exponentially easier as you get more experience. I think the reason this is so hard is because my advice for someone going through this question would probably change depending on their life circumstances, what they need in that immediate moment, and what their goals are long term. If they're the sort of person that somehow has like a support net and they're just like never going to be happy unless they get into a specific company or they get some specific title, like they have to be a backend engineer or something like that, then very little that I could say here would probably sway them. I think for a lot of people, especially coming out of a boot camp, which is a massive time investment, it's a massive cost to like both money and time in your life to go to. This is a really tough question because when they get out, you want to start working, right? And it's maybe time goes on, you're still looking for a position, and you start feeling like you need to take the first thing that comes along. And that's why I'm saying like this is going to vary from person to person. If I think in general, if you like the company and it's good pay, they're paying you fairly, and they it's, it seems like it's going to be interesting work in a direction that you want to head, I think generally it can be a good move. I say that, I know that I work at Twitter, but Twitter was the first job offer that I got, believe it or not, while I was doing my job hunt. And that I could have very easily looked different if another company had extended me an offer first, because I was interviewing with like 2 or 3 other companies, startups, at the same time as I was interviewing with Twitter. So I think that in general, it's probably a good call to get your foot in the door, get a job. But there's a massive caveat to this. Like, if for some reason you can afford to wait, or if for some reason, a big reason to turn down a role regardless of the cost is if you sense that the company is really rude or they're mean in the interview, or you do one of my personal favorite questions in an interview as someone who used to be a recruiter in a past life, in a different industry. One of my favorite things to do to ask someone is a recruiter is to say, like, what's your like, what do you like about this company? And if they like pause and then they kind of like look at each other and they hem and haw and then they answer you, that's a big red flag to me. If they're rude to you in the interview, like that first company I told you about, that I had that horrible technical interview, although that was a learning experience for me, I would never have accepted a job offer from there, because I don't want to work at a place where the CTO talks to some junior engineer like that. And I think there are valid reasons to turn down a job, but in general, I think it's better to get your foot in the door. And if it's not a place that you're super, super wild about working at long term, work there for a year or 2, and then you're going to have a lot easier time finding your next position. But Brady and Sam, you might have other opinions or insights.
No, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. And I mean, +1 to if someone's being rude to you. I can think of, so before I started interviewing, there were a couple of mock interviews that I was able to like cash in on through the boot camp that I went to. And the first one that I had done, it was only a mock interview. It wasn't a real interview, but the guy was so rude to me. He made me feel so stupid. It killed all of my, like, on a level from 1 to 10, I already was like at a 2 of confidence. And then it got brought down to like -3 probably talking to him. And then I had the second mock interview and the guy was so much nicer. And he's like, it's okay if you don't know stuff. Like, you can just say, like, this is what it might be, but I'm not sure. Like, that's probably a safe bet instead of just trying to explain stuff that you don't know, which I felt like I needed to do based on the first interview. I was a mess. And I think over and over, I've heard stories like that, and I would never, like, first of all, you'd never want to bomb the interview, and then like having somebody shove it in your face, like, oh, you didn't do well. We're gonna make you know that you didn't do well. Like, all right, get over yourself. So, that's all of my little rant on that.
Yeah, the interview is your chance to interview the company as well. So I agree with Nathan. I would take whatever opportunity I got if I was looking for my first job, but I would make sure to look for red flags in the interview, because as long as there's no red flags, I personally would take it, as long as it's enough money for me to survive and live comfortably. That's what I did. My first paid gig was contracting, and it was only paid $25 an hour in San Francisco, which is not that easy to live on, unless you might have to like live in like some crappy place. So yeah, and this is when was this? 2013. So my first software engineering paid position was a remote contracting gig, $25 an hour. We can go on to the next question.
Awesome. Next one is, what are your favorite resources and websites, dev tools, productivity tools you would recommend for junior devs?
Good question. I'm about to drop something in here. This is a repo that I made while I was in Lambda School, and it says Lambda School on it, but this isn't exclusive to Lambda School. This is for anybody. There's 2 sections to this repo. So one of the things I did when I sent out all of those LinkedIn messages out, and then I found a few people willing to talk with me, is I asked them if I could interview them either over message or in video chat, kind of like I told you. And I took those quotes with their permission, and I quoted them here with advice for future devs. So that's one of the sections on there that you can see. The other one is a whole host of technology resources and links. It's not complete. There are still areas that I'd love to have it improved, and I'm always open to people submitting PRs for new resources to go in there. But there's a lot of good stuff that I've personally used throughout my journey in there, and some other people that have contributed as well. So those are good like resources, some good websites, things like that. Like that portfolio template website, HTML5 Up, is in there, for instance, and javascript.info, some of the other stuff I've mentioned. So check that out. One of the other things that I really like that probably a lot of people here have heard of, because it's a very popular concept, at least in the tech industry, is the Pomodoro technique of studying, where you set like a timer for like 25 minutes and then you take some time, like 5 minutes for a break. It's a little more complicated than that because you get into like super cycles, and some breaks are a little longer than others, but I found that really helpful while I was studying. I haven't done that as much while I've been working, mainly because with quarantine going on, I've tried to work for a little longer than that, like an hour or two, and then like sneak out for a 30-minute run. So I've kind of switched it up a little bit, but some of that stuff can be good. You can actually get Pomodoro timers that you can install as a Chrome extension and use. Productivity tools other than that, Notion. Notion is amazing. I would recommend that you sign up for it. About a month ago, they removed the cap for people to store data on there, pictures, text, content. I take all notes on there now for classes that I'm currently doing, because I'm currently self-studying data science and trying to get into some machine learning stuff personally, not professionally. And I use that for storage of documents. I also, I don't store work notes on there for like complex technical stuff because, security issues with Twitter. I do store questions that I want to ask people in one-on-ones on there. So if I think of something that I want to ask my tech lead in the next meeting about like my career or something like that, some question I have, I'll write it down in Notion. I keep a Notion document with everyone's names for one-on-ones, and I'll write questions down there to ask in the next meeting. Little things like that. Roam Research is another good note-taking tool that's graph-based, but I think it's beta only and it's closed at the moment. Anyways, some of that stuff, good note-taking tools. Hygiene is key. You can like dominate with note-taking, your schedule with note-taking if you do that properly. So yeah, I think those are my biggies, but I'm always looking for new tips. So yeah, I'm interested to hear what else other people use.
I highly recommend everybody read the book Mindset. It's not a technical book, but I think it helped me a lot in my journey. I read that as soon as I finished the bootcamp, because Dev Bootcamp was heavily into growth mindset, which I wasn't aware of that concept before I went to Dev Bootcamp. So I didn't have time to read the book while I was in the bootcamp, but as soon as I graduated, I read that, and it helped me a lot in my journey, I think. But yeah, there's tons of tools. You gotta kind of just see what you like to do. I like front-end masters. I've been a paying customer for a long time. I did get 2 years for free in the beginning. So there's ways to snaggle. You just gotta be creative. Right now, the way to snaggle is if you can get a GitHub education. I don't know how you do that, but I posted the link in our Slack. It seems like you might be able to just take a community college class and like take a picture with your ID and get that, and then you can get that GitHub educational account, and then front-end masters gives you an account for free, I think. Treehouse is awesome for like learning CSS and stuff. I used it a lot. I've never paid for Treehouse. I've had that account for like 5 years because San Francisco Library gives you a free account. And you don't need to live in San Francisco to get an account. Anybody in California can get a San Francisco Library card. I think there's other libraries as well. I'm not sure which ones give free Treehouse accounts. There's Exorcism.io I used to do a lot. They had like mentors on there too. There's Execute program, just to do like little exercises every day. Egghead.io is another one that I like. And then books, JavaScript books. I always recommend people read Eloquent JavaScript first, Effective JavaScript next, and then Secrets of a JavaScript Ninja. They're all older books, so it's not gonna have like the newer JavaScript stuff, but I read all 3 of those books in that order, and I think it helped me a lot because JavaScript is confusing. I don't like You Don't Know JS. I don't like Kyle Simpson, but so yeah, just find people that you like. You'll just find people that you gravitate more to. So like on Front-End Masters, Kyle Simpson's on there. He has all these You Don't Know JS. I don't watch any of those. I like Will Sentence a lot, so I watch all the JavaScript, the hard parts that Will Sentence puts out. So that's one of my favorite ones on Front-End Masters, and Brian Holt's React courses are really good. Kent C. Dodds is pretty good too. So I also recommend Twitter. Be active in the dev community on Twitter. That's how I kind of figure out what other trends are. I can share my Twitter link, and I'll let Brady go if she has anything to add. Also, we're reaching 1:30, so I don't know how much time you got, Nathan. We usually go till people leave, but you're not forced to stay on if you have stuff to do.
I'm fine for staying a little bit longer. We still have quite a list of questions I've been eyeing.
Brady, you have anything to add on resources? You're muted. You're muted.
I knew I would do that at one point today. The only thing I can think of to add is I like Interview Cake. If you feel like algorithms are something that you're wanting to look at, wanting to improve on currently, well, I haven't checked recently, but at least like 2 weeks ago, they had a 90% discount going still from COVID, trying to help people out. But I know there's a lot of other free resources too. And actually, if that is something that people are trying to improve, I thought this was going to be the 20-minute rule that Nathan was talking about. I had seen somebody post recently how he went from going from bootcamp to working at Google, and he would work on these coding challenges, and he would spend the 20 minutes on it, and then I don't think it was you, Nathan. I hope it was someone else. I don't know. He'd spend the 20 minutes, and if it was still just really stuck at that point, he would look at the answer and then try to learn it from there, because otherwise you're just kind of banging your head against the wall, and who knows when you're going to solve it. I thought that was a pretty good piece of advice to pass on. But other than that, the resources...
I got another book recommendation, Atomic Habits. So
yeah, that's a great one too.
I was just going to mention that.
Yeah, so
endorsed by all 3.
Prep your environment for success. I have like a reading area now, and I have an area where I do my coding. Like I don't sit on the couch and code or sit in my bed and code. Not only is that bad for your back, especially in your bed. I know from experience, I got a pinched nerve. I used to code in my bed a lot. I never do that anymore. So my back pain is gone. and it just gets you in your habit. Like if you always code in the same spot, that's like where you go and you get in the zone. The hardest thing when you're coding is to get into the flow state. But if you can figure out how to get into a flow state, that's when you start cranking out like code like super fast. But it's hard to get into that state. So it's better to try and make it easier by, this is my code spot. It's comfortable to code here. Then it'll be easier for you and you will want to code more.
Actually, that reminds me, I don't only have a space, but when I put on my big noise canceling headphones and put on some music, I've got like a playlist on YouTube that I've just stolen from other people. I can try to see if I share that. I like very eclectic electronics. Like there's this marching band that I like to listen to. It's cooler than it sounds. But I've got like a playlist that I put on, and that helps me just like, no, it's time to focus. I have to do this now. And then speaking of yes, I'm not the only one listening to marching bands. So speaking of pinch nerve, when I was in boot camp, one of the instructors who I have invited to hopefully come be a guest host in the future, as a special guest in the future, he recommended this little wearable device. I just was looking up. It was called Lumo Lift, but now it's been around for a while. So this article actually talks about different wearable devices that can remind you, like it'll buzz if you start to slouch like I do all the time. Because I'm not wearing it, but it will remind you that you should sit up straight because it's easy to forget about.
Yeah. And a pinched nerve is the worst pain in the world. At least for me, when I got it, I don't want to ever have that again. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced.
Oh yeah, Sam, could you repeat? You said them all too fast. Those books, and in what order?
Oh, we can go on with the questions. I'll get the links.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, back to questions. Given the given climate, due to COVID and the inability of attending an in-person networking event, what do you suggest to make the new connections in the field?
This is tough. This is really tough. COVID made the hard process even harder. I think my advice would be to continue getting into conferences and meetups like this, or like big developer conferences with people that would normally be speaking on a stage, just speaking over Zoom. Keep doing those things. And by the way, pro tip, something I did while I was in boot camp, I applied for like scholarship tickets. A lot of times conferences have a ton of those to give away. And
you can volunteer too.
Yes, yeah, you can do that as well. There are a lot of ways to get in free, so you don't have, like, I didn't have $400 or $500 to pay for a conference ticket. Like, no way. I still don't have that kind of money really to throw a conference ticket. So like, I think that's something I would recommend doing, but maybe recognize that right now that's maybe more for the learning side of things instead of the networking side of things. You need to focus on some more organic ways to start building networking requests. I would look for some communities that you can join electronically. It sounds like you have a Slack channel for this meetup, which is amazing. I should go join that when I'm done here. I didn't know that. I think that if you're going to a boot camp, that's a great way. Obviously, it's still within the boot camp, but that's a great way to make friends. Another thing that I haven't had as much success with, but I know people that have, is to do open source and start contributing to open source projects, and people kind of get to know you, or at least a section, a perspective of you as like, a contributor to a project, someone that's dependable, that has worked in that project. I just watched a live stream recently that Cassidy, if any of you follow her on Twitter, she's an amazing engineer to follow and does a lot for the community. She just recently had a live stream on Twitch with the entire React core team. And they said that almost without exception, if you want to end up working on the React core team, the best way is to start contributing to React core on GitHub, like to start participating in open source. Almost everyone there on the team found their way into the team through some sort of path like that. So, your goal might not be to work on Rec core or something like that, but you can make friends with people in companies by participating. So it could be a change as small as something for documentation, or it could be a lot of times open source projects will have labels for like good beginner ticket or something like that. And you can go work on those and kind of maybe build some connections electronically like that. But absolutely, it is hard right now with COVID. I truly believe it won't be that way for forever. Might be that way a lot longer than we like with coronavirus worldwide. But for right now, with the hands that we've been dealt, I think that would be my advice for trying to build networking friendships.
Hey Brady, do you remember that we had somebody drop into the meetup one time, and they said there's a way on Meetup to look up like virtual meetups? Do you remember how he was doing that? He like was from India, and he was like coming to our meetup, and I was like, how did you find our meetup? It's like that was when we were first starting. It wasn't even like not that many people knew about it, and he came to like the first one, and he like found it on Meetup. Like he was going to tons of like virtual meetups. Do you remember what he searched for? You're muted.
No. Mary is writing, I can help with that. I do that daily. Is that what you're referring to? Oh, she keeps unmute. Oh, okay. Maybe once we reach a certain number of people? Huh.
Locked? Oh man.
That's weird. Let's see.
Maybe you can unmute her.
Yeah,
I don't know which one she is though.
It's one of the M's. All right.
But there's somewhere in Meetup to look for virtual meetups anywhere in the world.
Huh.
And this dude came to our meetup, even though it was like, what time? I think he said it was like 1 o'clock in the morning or something. And he was like in our meetup, and he had gone to like another meetup before ours. So he was just going to like tons of virtual meetups. I also go to some meetups in virtual reality. So if you have Oculus Quest or any VR headset, there's I use Outspace VR. I go to a Bitcoin meetup, and your avatars and people give presentations. So that's a new style meetup as well in the COVID era. So did we find Mary or no?
I cannot figure out. I wonder if maybe after a certain number of people join, that gets blocked or something.
You can't unmute her?
I can't figure out how.
There she is. She's unmuted.
Oh, yay!
Hi. I just refreshed, so I probably have lost like all the chat and everything. But so what I do is when you first go to your Meetup homepage and it says within 25 miles, if you click on that, you can go to any distance. And Meetup's API is not that, it was not designed for this. So 2 things you got to remember. If you do the any distance, and then you can search for whatever term, I just go to the tech category. Sometimes, and then make sure you go to all meetups. So like you can see your groups and suggestions or all meetups. You want to go on the right-hand side and do the all meetup thing. And once you do all of those things, the last thing to remember is that when you are looking at your schedule of meetups on Meetup, which I don't know how people do that normally, but if you're looking at like today's meetup, the time that it shows you is always the time in the time zone of the event, not your time. So that is something that you'll have to like manually either add it to, if you get the emails and you add it to your calendar, it'll come up correctly. But if you just look at Meetup and you're thinking, oh, I have something at 1, I have something at 3, and then, you know, plot twist, that 1 o'clock was actually, you know, 10 in your time or whatever. So but you can do all meetups, and then you can make sure you look at all the, you know, any distance from your city. And then just remember that you want to make note of the time zones. And yeah, I do it all the time. It works great.
Awesome.
I have messed around with that before, so I can, unless Mary beats me to it, I can try to take a screencast and post it. And Mary, if you have lost that chat, if you join our Slack, I will at the end put all of the links that were in the Slack over in our Slack conversation.
But yeah, and you can also form your own meetups. So we met a ton of people. Like, we can't go anywhere. I still have shelter in place here in the Bay Area, so I can't go anywhere. So I just started this meetup, and I've met a ton of people. If you can just think of something, like, you can make a meetup for anything. So if you just want to make like a study group, or like 100 days of code, like group of people that are doing 100 days of code or something, yeah, you can just make like a Discord or do it in our Slack. Even in our Slack, somebody made a channel, 100 days of code, and there's a few people, like, accountability reasons, like posting what they did every day and like encouraging each other. So yeah, Twitter's also good. Just once you find, there's a dev community on there. You just gotta filter, learn how to find the signal and the noise on Twitter. It's a skill. The only way to learn how to do that is spend a lot of time on Twitter.
I've noticed you might be able to, because on LinkedIn I've been posting and I've been getting I'm networking a lot more than I had been, but I'm typically networking with people who are specifically looking for a job. So maybe if you are able to talk on LinkedIn about, these ideas of working together for 100 days of code, or if there's some other thing that you could organize, you can still do quite a bit from a virtual setup like this. Yeah.
And I wouldn't worry about if you don't get any traction with stuff you post, if nobody's commenting or liking. Just keep consistently posting what you're working on, stuff you're struggling with, questions you have. You never know when a lot of people might gravitate to connect with what you said. And once, if one thing you do goes viral, like, your network will just grow like really quickly out of nowhere, just from like one random thing you never thought. You were just like brain dumping stuff in your head on the screen in one of the social networks, and it just explodes for some reason. Like, you never know. You never know. So I think it's good just to consistently just post what you're doing. More chance for you to connect with people.
I'm going to need to go in about 5 to 10 minutes, FYI.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's been it's an hour 50 minutes already.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Do you want to try fitting one more in?
Yeah, let's do one more. Okay.
Cool. So next one here is looking for any recommendations on how a junior dev. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Oh, wait. How is that done? Okay. Thoughts on the future of remote work and how it has, how will Twitter's new policy of working from home indefinitely affect your team? I did a terrible job reading that.
That's cool. Yeah, this is a good question too. The world is changing. This isn't unique to tech. I live in because I live in the Bay Area, I have 4 housemates, and because, you know, rent's crazy. And out of all of us, only like one person, pretty much me, is planning on, at least for now, staying in the Bay Area. And everyone works at different companies, but they're all kind of just like leaving, pretty much, going to Virginia and like Colorado and stuff like that. So the world is changing, right? And like they don't all work in tech. Some of them work in different companies, and they can just work from home now, at least as long as coronavirus is a thing. So, you know, Twitter was the first major US corporation to send employees home for coronavirus, and it's kind of been pioneering among major US corporations along the way for work from home. And I think in the long term with my team, really what it's going to be is that my day-to-day work will look much like what we're doing right here, right now. Meetings with my squad, instead of being in a room, are going to be in a Zoom room or a Google Meet room, or, you know, Jitsi or whatever. And we use Slack for communication. You start having to think about async communication instead of synchronous communication, where you fire off a message to someone and it's okay if they don't respond to you right away. Like, you know, they might respond to you in a half hour or an hour, or later, maybe a day or two, if it's not super pressing and they have other emergencies going on. And so that's something to take into account. That looks very different. Like, that's a different thing to kind of wrap your mind around and to work in. And I've seen some people kind of deal with that. It was rough for me at Lambda. Lambda is 100% remote, for people that don't know. It's all over Zoom and Slack. So in a lot of ways, this has seemed like my bootcamp experience. But the other big thing outside of work is that for most people that I work with, they're all moving away. They're still going to have their job. I'm still going to be seeing them every day, but it's going to be electronic. They're all going to be moving away to different parts around the world. And I think that is going to become more and more common. And I think in a lot of ways it's going to be hard initially to do that, because we're all so, at least in America, we're all so work focused. We spend so much time at work. Our lives revolve around work. I think maybe a net positive for our society and the world might be that as this happens and people start working electronically and remotely, once coronavirus is taken care of, but we're still working remotely, maybe the long-term outcome will be that, while we still work with each other through a screen, we start placing a lot more emphasis on the communities we live in, and on our neighbors, and on the people that are living around us, that we actually get to know the people who live next door to us. And I think for like myself, that is probably going to be the longest term impact on my life and for my immediate team members, from Twitter's work from home policy. Ironically, just FYI, our productivity is actually up since quarantine started, which makes sense if you think about the fact that everyone nationwide, worldwide, is just kind of sitting at their house right now, not able to do anything except step out for a run or play board games or work or whatever.
Doesn't Twitter also have like a 4-day work week a month or something like that? Or is that a different company?
So that's one of the other things we're kind of pioneering right now. One day, we're basically giving one Friday off a month, and we've also from this year forward, we've made Juneteenth a company holiday, and
Lyft as well.
Stuff like that, just like that I'm seeing tech companies do, that I think will be picked up eventually by other non-tech companies, that hopefully will make this whole work from home thing better for everyone.
Yeah, and like, even though companies have unlimited paid time off, a lot of companies like Lyft has that. Like, it's so busy, like you don't want to take a day off. You're like, oh, I gotta finish this stuff. But like, when the companies, it's easier when they're like, this Friday is off for everybody. So I really like that Twitter's doing that. And Lyft did something similar they gave us a few extra days off, like randomly. Like before July 4th, they gave us one extra day. So we had Thursday and Friday off before July 4th. But they haven't done anything where it's consistently like once a month, like Twitter. Some other companies, I forget which one, they have a 4-day work week every week until like September or something, because they just realized that everything's so crazy right now. And I think the companies are just worried about burnout, because burnout is real. Like there's like so much work to be done at the tech companies that, and when you're working at home, sometimes it's hard to like find the work-life balance. So you can more easily burn out, especially since people aren't used to it yet. So I like what Twitter's doing. But yeah, thanks for joining us today, Nathan.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
So that was our last question for today. We haven't ever not answered all the questions, but I'm thinking we could.
You know what I could do if you want. We've got like 3 or 4 minutes here.
We'll still have an opportunity.
Oh, sorry, it cut out for a second. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were talking.
No problem. I had just been saying I was thinking I could just carry these on to next week, so that if it's not specifically oriented as a question to you.
Oh, does Slido let you do that? Copy all the questions to a different event?
I have no idea. I just signed myself up for an activity.
If you want, I can just try to do rapid fire, like 1 or 2 sentence answers for everything and go right down the list to close this out. We have like a couple minutes.
That's what we tried to do with Aline.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, let's see. Undergraduate degree is in physics. Should I pursue a graduate degree in CS, or should I stick to and rely on the bootcamp I'm currently in? I think that if you already have a degree, a bootcamp could be a really good way to go. Obviously, CS degrees will give you a lot of theory and things like that. But just so you know, I've had multiple people just in the last week reach out to me on LinkedIn that are in CS degree programs asking me if they should do a bootcamp because they didn't feel that their CS degree prepared them for the current skills needed for modern web stacks, at least. Okay, does the interview process place more weight on work experience, side projects, or needed past data structures and algo questions? I think that when you're starting out, the weight is probably on like side projects. You're not going to have a lot of prior work experience, but maybe people that you've mentored, things that you've done, volunteering for things. As time goes on, especially for higher level positions, you probably will have a lot more weight on like those technical questions and on past work experience. After working at a large company like Twitter, do you still desire to work more in a startup environment? Pros and cons working at a large company. Yes, I would love to work at a startup environment. I still am self-teaching myself stuff because I would actually like to have my own startup someday. But who knows when, if ever, that will ever happen. So I still think that's cool. I admire people that do that, but I'm very happy at Twitter right now and I'm enjoying where I'm at. What are some of your tips for doing hacker ranking assessment? Look at Paulia's problem-solving techniques. It's a framework, a mindset for approaching problems. I would recommend that you learn something like that and then apply that to every problem that you find on something like HackerRank. Outside of that, it's really just going to boil down to doing problems, like I think Brady said, and maybe Sam, just repetition until you get some knowledge of how to, like, you start seeing similar patterns. Would you consider only pursuing job titles such as junior developer, selling yourself short as an entry-level SE? Is that an unnecessary limitation? I would probably just list yourself as a developer or like full stack engineer if you have a lot of experience with working with databases. I think your title walking in is absolutely going to be a junior level role. I don't think you need to call yourself a junior developer. I've seen a lot of tweets recently from people saying like the biggest difference, or if you want to become a mid-level or senior developer, like go to your Twitter profile and remove the word junior. And obviously that's a joke. There's a lot of work that goes, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into leveling up in this field and reaching mid and senior tiers. There are tiers, but I do think that when you're starting out, you don't necessarily have to put junior down, even though your first role will be a junior role. Thoughts on junior devs using a program like Outco? Oh, by the way, last question on the last question. Also, it's probably best not to put that you're a student of something down on your profile. Put that you just are like a developer or something, especially if you're already job hunting, because you're selling yourself short big time if you just put you're a student of like web development down. Thoughts on junior devs using a program like Outco or Interview Kickstart? I actually don't know what those are, but I'm going to assume that those are like interview prep and algorithm things.
I can talk about it after.
Okay, cool. I'll skip that question. I will say that I used some online interview prep tools that were like student-based. You'd interview someone else and then they'd interview you. And I found those really helpful. How would you keep the pipeline full with interviews, cold emails, recruiters, job boards? That's just going to be a numbers game. Like I said, firing off lots of applications, trying to network. You might not get any bites based on networking, but you know, still can be worth it. So better to have projects on your resume in a variety of languages or a variety of projects within the same language ecosystem. Good question. I think it's good if you want to like know multiple languages. What languages you use and learn are going to boil down to what area you're trying to get a job in tech. If you're going for like front end, JavaScript is non-negotiable. Obviously, if you're doing like data science or something, then you're going to learn lots of Python and maybe like R and Rust and things like that. So I think you will never regret knowing multiple languages, but I think for like your first role, I think it's better to know one language really, really well than to know like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 languages just barely enough to be slightly dangerous. And I think it will be easier to learn other languages if you are like really, if you have deep knowledge of one language. Let's see, should you only list languages? Okay, I already answered that. As a front-end engineer, that one's directed to Brady, so I'll skip that. Is LinkedIn Premium worth it? I've never paid for it. I've only used it when they've offered me the free trial, and I'm not going to diss LinkedIn. I think it's a great tool, but I personally didn't think it contributed much to my job search. So, cool.
Awesome. Great job.
See, this could have been a 30-minute meetup.
All right. Thank you all so much. Brady, Sam, thank you for asking me to be on here. It was like humbling to be asked, and I've just like loved the questions that we've seen today. I think clearly the people attending this meetup are very thoughtful and very motivated based on the questions that they're asking, because they're the exact same questions that I've seen pop up in on a lot of other people's minds. So thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it. Hope you all have a good weekend.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And just to mention how I first started, the first time I hung out with Nathan, I met him actually at a Lambda School meetup, like briefly, but then I met him at a conference. So when he was talking about conferences and networking, I hung out with him for like a whole day at like one of the Dev Week conference, and I got to go eat lunch at Twitter and stuff. And they have an awesome lunch spot. Do you guys still get lunch, or did they cancel that?
We do not currently get free lunch. Yeah, I'm not going to complain, but I do miss it. I do miss it.
Yeah, they have a really nice like outdoor area where you can like eat lunch. Well, hopefully they bring it back, but I wouldn't count on it since Twitter is going fully remote now. But yeah, that was fun. So yeah, that's how we met. It's just random. I was just sitting by myself at the conference, and then I saw Nate, who is my mentee at Lambda School, and I think you guys were hanging out together. I forget how we like started hanging out.
Nate and I were in the same cohort at Lambda when we started out.
Yeah, so it's always just random encounters. But yeah, thanks for joining us. And I guess
all right.
I can take this other question.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
see ya.
Thank you so much.
Real
Have-
quick,
Mhm.
I was just gonna end with anyone that wants to, feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter, or even if you go to my portfolio site, which you can get to on GitHub, I have like a contact form. I try my best to answer questions for people that are genuine when they send me questions and they're trying to ask for like or just they want to talk about the job hunt and things like that. So I do my best to reply. You're always welcome to message me, to anyone. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
All right, later.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
I just reposted his LinkedIn in the chat in case anybody missed it.
Awesome.
We can wrap up these two questions, I think, Brady,
Yeah.
unless you have to go. Are you okay to keep going?
No, I've got some more time.
Okay, so Outco, I know a couple people that went to Outco and both produced good results. So the person that referred me to Lyft, he also went to Dev Bootcamp. He went to Dev Bootcamp in New York. That's the one I met because I answered his Stack Overflow question. He ended up going to Outco a few years into his, I think maybe 2 or 3 years after he started into his software engineering journey. And then like now he works at Lyft. Like, I don't know if he would be at Lyft if he never went through the Outco program. It's kind of hard to tell if it's because of Outco, but I think it helped. I also know another person who went to 2 boot camps and did Outco after. So they went to Dev League in Hawaii. That's where I first met them because I've given talks at Dev League. I'm from Hawaii, so, and the founder of Dev League, who was on a few weeks ago, Jason Sewell, I think that's how you say his name. I know him, so whenever I went back to Hawaii, I would go just tell my story at Dev League, and I met this person, Steven, and then he graduated Dev League, and later on, he still, I guess he just wanted to take another boot camp. He didn't feel ready to like jump in and start working, so he went to App Academy. And then after that, he finally got his first job as a junior. And then, but he had bigger goals. He wanted to work at Google, and he didn't really know data structures and algorithms too well. So he went to Outco, and now he works at Google. It's super crazy. I watched his journey happen in real time, like on LinkedIn. He was always like posting all the leak codes he was doing. And from going to Outco, I think he developed the habit of like always doing like leak codes. I don't know if he would have developed that habit if he didn't go to Outco. And like he didn't go straight to Google. So he went to Outco, and then he was just going ham. Like he was just, every day he was posting leak code stuff on LinkedIn. And then he got hired at TikTok, and I was like, holy crap, he got hired at TikTok. And then a few months later, he updated his thing and he got a job at Google. I was like, damn. So it was crazy to watch. I saw his journey from boot camp in Hawaii all the way to Google in the span of like 2 to 3 years. So that was pretty wild to watch. So those are my 2 stories of people that I know that went to Outco. Like I even thought of like going to Outco. I went to Bradfield School of Computer Science. They have an algo and data structures course. I took it to brush up for my Facebook and Google interviews. Because my thought process is like, even though it's expensive, like if you do get into those companies, whatever you paid is like nothing. You can get a bonus that's going to be like way more than cover the cost of the program. But just like anything else, it's you get what you put in. So like if you do Outco and you go ham, it's probably going to pay off. Like it is expensive, but it depends. So I like doing programs like that, even though it's expensive. I've taken 3 courses at Bradfield School of Computer Science, and each course is like $1,800, but I think it's worth it. I like learn stuff, and then not only that, your network grows every time. Like I said before, just by taking a class, now you become a part of, like, now I have this community of Bradfield School of Computer Science students and like the teachers and stuff like that. So you're not only paying for the material, you also like getting this whole network of people too, which is, I think people overlook that value when they're paying for like boot camps or any type of education. Education can be expensive, but then I think people overlook the value of the network you gain from doing the whatever class you're taking.
There is a follow-up question about, is Outco not really for junior devs, or is it more for people who have like 1 to 3 years of experience?
I believe it's for anybody, but you can double check. They have a lot of virtual meetups where you can get more information. I think you can even take like some free workshops or something. If you go to their website, I think I can try to look up the link once Brady jumps on this next question. I post a bunch of links in the Slack too on their events, because they have some good events. Like I go to some of their events. I even thought about going there. But yeah, I ended up going to Bradfield because it was cheaper. Outco is like, I forget how much it is, like $5,000 or something like that. Like I was gonna go to Outco when they first started. Back then they only had like one person working there. I think it was like a 1-person shop. This was 2016 or something like that. So it's a lot different now, I think, but yeah.
Cool. So yeah, while you look that up, I can jump into this last question. As a front-end engineer, do you have to tap into artistic and visual design skills, or do you work with a designer in the company? We have a designer that works with our team. He works alongside the product manager, and they will kind of suss out how things are going to, how they should work, basically. And then he does all the designs, makes not just wire screens, but will make mock-ups for us to see and leave notes on how things should behave. I'm like reading while I'm talking. You can't multitask apparently. And so I do not really use my creativity for how it should look. It's kind of a minimalist app. A lot of front-end stuff, I think, has been moving in that direction. But what I have been spending a lot of focus on, we've back in the fall, we started measuring, there's a tool you can use to see how accessible your site is for people with various disabilities. So the contrast of if there's any letters on a background that's not very different from the color of the letters, that's a huge issue. There's a lot of different accessibility concerns. I can try to, I'll post something in the Slack more about that, but we've been trying to make things easy for people who use screen readers. If they're not able to see what's on the screen themselves, and we have been making many more considerations to how you can navigate the page with the keyboard instead of needing to use a mouse on web. Obviously, mobile would be different, but that's a whole other set of considerations. That is more of the type of stuff that we have been thinking about on our team versus like how to make it look pretty, which I see as being the designer's job. Sam, you're pretty front end, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not good at design. And so I really like being on teams that have, I call it the Trinity, where you have like an awesome product manager, a UX designer. Sometimes you have one person, I've worked on a team before. It was awesome, where I had 2 designers, one focused more on UX and one on UI. So like one gave me the mock-ups and the other one like did the research and like wrote up like a glossary of all the terms we use and like just more research about like why we're building and what we're building and stuff like that. So it's really awesome to work like with the product manager and the designers and the engineers, and then you kind of just all work together. I find it works much better like that to build products. It's really hard to find a unicorn. A unicorn is a person who is both a designer and a developer. So if you do have both of those skills, it's probably easier to get your foot in the door, because that's hard quality to find. Just because there's so much. There's 2 different disciplines.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't realize that. I had noticed I enjoyed trying to make things look pretty, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been really fun to be focusing on other stuff as part of this job.
Yeah, I just use Material UI and be like, okay, it looks pretty. Or Lyft also has their own design system.
Oh, cool. We use, gosh, I know all of the words get tossed up at the same time. It's like Storybook and Rebase. It's something like Material UI. There's, lots of, I don't know about Tailwind.
Tailwind's pretty popular. That's different though. That's like all these like utility classes that you can use.
Cool, but that was the end of the questions. So I can go ahead and stop recording. If anyone,
wait, there's one more question.
Oh, whoops.
It just popped up.
Hey. Okay, so I recently graduated from the boot camp. They taught Ruby on Rails for backend. What are your thoughts on Rails? Should I learn a new language for the backend? I mean, I don't think it's necessary. I think it depends on where you are and what sort of jobs are available in that area. I use backend Ruby. We don't happen to use Rails. When Trunk Club was a startup, Sinatra happened to give us the flexibility of what we were looking for versus Rails. So we went with Sinatra and just haven't changed. I think you could look through some jobs and see, like, if no jobs in your area are looking for Ruby or Rails, then yeah, maybe you can focus on a different language, but get a feel maybe for what the area is looking for. I still think that if you can prove that you know the concepts, like object-oriented Ruby, a lot of companies are probably going to use some sort of object-oriented backend. And I think if you know it well enough, if you understand what's happening with all of the Rails, then it's going to translate. You'll be able to hop over to a different language once you get onboarded somewhere.
Okay, can you hear me? My AirPods died.
Yes, I can hear. Were you trying to talk and I kept on over talking you?
We were talking. Yeah, I mean, there are still jobs with Ruby and Rails. So if you're asking because you think there's no jobs, I know a bunch of people that have been doing Rails for years. But yeah, like Brady said, just look. You can ask too, like if there's companies that you want to work for. As part of your job search, you can just do research. Try and like ask people while you're networking. And then if you're able to talk to somebody at a company you like, just ask them what their stack is. And then if you build up this list of like companies that you want to work for, then you can kind of figure out like what you should learn. If none of those companies are doing Rails, then maybe you want to like learn another thing. But if you like doing Rails, you can just keep like building apps on Rails. Like, I don't think there's anything bad with Rails besides it's not as popular as it was before, but it still is used by a lot of companies.
I'm reading the messages pop up, and I'm also in Chicago, Mary. Now I'm in the suburbs at least, but yeah, I get reached out to all the time. People are looking for Rails developers.
I do too, yeah. But but what else? Somebody said in the chat, entry-level dev jobs seem to want people who can do a ton of design. Every company wants people who can do design, and developers. Companies can't get what they want because those people are like super hard to find. So what else? A bunch of comments in here. Oh, Mary's in here doing DBS for over a decade. Oh.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording.
Okay.
At this point, it seems like there's few enough of us. We could probably have some kind of a conversation. So the lovely lady will announce in a second when she has stopped recording.